Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Podcastage. Today I am back with a review of the Rode TF-5s. This is a matched pair of small diaphragm condensers, and if you do want to check it out, it costs about $1,500. Full disclosure, these are loaner microphones sent by Rode 5 years ago in 2019. Sorry about that, but all of my recording settings will be listed in the doobly-doo as well as the description, and now let's talk about what comes in the box. You get 2 microphones, 2 foam windscreens, 2 microphone clips with the associated 5/8 to 3/8 inch microphone stand adapters, 1 stereo bar with another 5/8 to 3/8 inch adapter, and a tiny bit of documentation that is like a mini hardcover book. Then as far as the build quality, I have zero complaints about these things. They feel absolutely fantastic. They have an all-metal body which feels very durable. On the front you have mesh covering the diaphragm. As we move around the microphone, there are no buttons or switches. On the rear, you have the XLR port, and if it matters to you or not, this gear is made in Australia. I'm not going to read all of the specs to you, but I will have some graphs up on screen in case you want to pause and take a closer look, and I'll also have them listed in the description. Something I want to point out: the frequency response graph that's being published today is vastly different from the graph that is in the documentation. I don't know which one's right. That is annoying, but what's important is listening to it, so let's move on and listen to the microphone. Now I am spinning around the TF-5 to 90 degrees to show you the off-axis rejection and coloration. Continuing around to 180 degrees, this is the rear of the microphone. Continuing around to the second 90-degree angle, there we are, and then rotating and ending at the front of the microphone. Then as far as the plosive rejection, I'm not going to do that test, but because this is an SDC, it has minimal to no protection from wind. So if I breathe in its general direction, it sounds like the apocalypse. So if you're using this for voice, unless you have perfect microphone technique, use a pop filter, please. Now I am right on top of the TF-5 with the windscreen installed, and here is how it's sounding. Now I'm about 6 inches off of the mic with it pointed at the corner of my mouth, and here's how it sounds. Now I'm about 1 foot away from the TF-5, about 2 feet away from the TF-5, and about 4 feet away from the Rode TF-5. Now I am typing on a keyboard with Gateron blue switches to see how much of my voice versus how much of the keyboard it picks up. And for the gamers, as if there will be any gamers using this microphone, here is how it types, sounding on the sad W keys. Now here is how the microphone sounds about 6 inches away from my mouth in a fairly well-treated room. And now here is how the microphone sounds about 6 inches away from my mouth in a completely untreated room. Now here is how the microphone sounds 12 inches away from my mouth in a well-treated room while being underboomed. Now here is how the microphone sounds being underboomed about 12 inches away from my mouth in a completely untreated room. And now here is how the microphone sounds being overhead boomed about 11 inches away from my mouth in a relatively well-treated room. And now here is how the microphone sounds being overhead boomed about 11 inches away from my mouth in a completely untreated room. Now I want to see how effective the microphone and the provided mount are at rejecting shocks, so I'll start by tapping on my desk to see if it can reject that. And then I will tap on the boom arm. Next, because I'm incredibly annoying, I am going to tap on the body of the microphone to see if there are any kind of resonant frequencies. Now I want to see if the provided foam windscreen has any kind of significant impact on the tone of the recording. So right now I'm 6 inches off of the microphone. The windscreen is not installed, and here is how it's sounding. Now here is how the microphone sounds with the provided windscreen installed. Do you hear any kind of significant change in the tone of the recording, or does the foam sound fairly transparent? And for good measure, here is another sample of the TF-5 without the provided foam windscreen 6 inches away from my mouth. And here's another sample of the TF-5 with the provided windscreen, just so you have a second sample. Now let's do a test that I've never done before. I want to hear the self noise of the TF-5 against a more known quantity, so I am comparing it to the Neumann KM184. The gain on the TF-5 is set at 32 dB. Gain on the Neumann is set at 36 decibels. And if you look at my meters, we are pretty much dead on in terms of gain matching. So this will allow us to hear what kind of difference in self noise there really is. First up, let's just hear both microphones in the room where there is a bit of ambient noise and there are air conditioning units nearby that I have no control over. And now let's remove a bit more of the ambient noise by throwing both of these microphones in my isolation cabinet to really hear what the difference in self-noise is. I will likely hate myself for doing this, but let's see if these microphones will ASMR when I use them in a stereo set. So right now they're set up in a 90-degree XY pattern, so not the widest stereo pattern, but as I move around, you should hear some form of stereo information, spatial information. This is so disgusting, but there you go. Does it ASMR or does it not? Now, like I always do, I'm going to do a quick spoken word comparison between the microphone that we're reviewing and a couple of other microphones that are available, so we can hear how it stacks up against its direct competition and also understand where it sits within the microphone market. Starting on the Rode TF-5, I am 6 inches off. I am running directly into the Universal Audio Twin X. Gain is set at 36 decibels, and here's how it sounds. First up on the chopping block is the Rode M5. This is Rode's much more affordable offering. I am 6 inches off of this. My gain is still set at 36 decibels, 24-bit, 48 kilohertz. A matched pair of these microphones costs only about $200, so $1,300 less than the TF-5, but here is how it sounds compared to its much more expensive higher-end sibling. Back again on the TF-5, nothing has changed. I'm also recording 24-bit, 48 kilohertz. Let's hear the next SDC. Now I'm on the Earthworks SR117, which is not a standard SDC microphone. This is a handheld condenser. I am 6 inches off. My gain was increased to 46 decibels. This costs about $200. The reason I'm including this is a relatively flat microphone, so this will allow us to hear the character of the TF-5 really coming through. So there you go, that is the 117. Let's go back and do a bunch more comparisons. Back with another palette cleanser on the TF-5. Here's how it sounds. That should be enough talking. Let's hear another microphone. Next up, I'm on the Lewitt LCT140 Air in linear mode with no pad engaged. I am 6 inches off, gain still at 36 decibels. Make sure to check the lower third. A matched pair of these costs about $300, so quite a bit more affordable than the TF-5, but here is how Lewitt's offering sounds compared to Rode's. Let's go back and do a whole bunch more. Alright, this is the TF-5 again. Make sure you check the lower third, but nothing changes from sample to sample. Let's hear the next microphone. Next up, I'm on the Sennheiser E614, 6 inches off, gain still set at 36 dB. Make sure to check the lower third because I am going to have to boost this so much more. I can't even hear myself in the monitors. That's how quiet this microphone is. This costs about $200 each, so $400 for two of them. And here is how this sounds compared to the TF-5. Alright, back on the TF-5, nothing has changed, but I want to clear out your ear canals. Here's how it sounds. Let's do a bunch more of these. Next up, I'm on the SE Electronics sE8, which is an awesome sounding SDC. I'm 6 inches off. My gain is still set at 36 decibels. A matched pair of sE8s costs about $550, I believe. So here is how this sounds compared to the TF-5. Let's go back and do quite a few more. I believe this is the midpoint palate cleanser. This is the TF-5, 6 inches off, pointed directly at my mouth. Here's how it sounds. Let's move on. Now I'm on the Shure KSM141 on the cardioid polar pattern with the linear mode and no pad, none of the switches engaged. I'm 6 inches off, gain is still set at 36 decibels, still 24-bit, still 48 kilohertz. A matched pair of these costs about $900, so again, quite a bit cheaper than the TF-5, but here is how this sounds compared to the Rode. Let's do some more. Here is another palate cleanser on the TF-5. That is enough talking. You know how I sound on it. Let's go to the next one. Next up, I'm on the Beyerdynamic MC930, 6 inches off, gain still set at 36 decibels. Neither of the switches are engaged. This goes for about $1,350 for a matched pair, so we're getting up much closer to the TF-5, but here is how Beyerdynamic's offering sounds compared to the Rode. Let's go back and do 2 more, I think. Would you believe me if I told you I am back on the Rode TF-5? Because I am. Here is how it sounds. Auditory Q-tip. Let's go ahead and move on. Next, I'm on the Neumann, KM184, 6 inches off, gain still set at 36 decibels. Make sure to check the lower third. A matched pair of these did decrease slightly. It is now $1,450, so $50 less than a matched pair of the TF-5s, but here is how the Neumann sounds compared to the Rode. Which one do you like better? Let's go back and do one final comparison. And we have one final microphone to go, which means this is the last palate cleanser on the TF-5. That is enough talking. Let's jump to the final microphone right now. I am on the Neumann U87 Ai. I am 6 inches off. Gain was decreased to 33 decibels. I am on the cardioid polar pattern with no pad and no filters engaged. This is a large diaphragm studio condenser microphone, so this is not a fair comparison. This also costs about $3,700 or over $7,000 for a matched pair, if that's a thing. So again, not a fair comparison. This is intended to be a control from video to video and comparison to comparison. That's it. Those are all the samples I have. Let's move on to the music test. Blind my eyes, horror movies every night, and MTV to kill our time. Can I sing about anything other than the 1980s and other than pizza? I doubt it, so I won't pretend that I can. And we will just move right on along. Moving right along. Let's go. Alright, all I can say is I think these are a really nice sounding set of small diaphragm condensers from Rode, and it makes me even more interested in trying out their more affordable NT5s. And first up as far as pros has to be the off-axis coloration on these things. I found it to be very minimal and also very inoffensive. The mics also didn't exhibit any kind of resonances if you bump it or tap it. Also, given the fact that it doesn't come with a shock mount, the shock rejection of this thing was pretty darn respectable. As far as the accessories go, I think the microphone clips and the stereo bar are absolutely fantastic and do a great job. And finally, the build quality of these microphones feels great. But then as far as cons, the biggest issue for me is the self-noise. Rode advertises 14 dBA, but when I compared it against a microphone with a self-noise of 13 dBA, it seemed quite a bit higher than just a 1 dBA delta, so I think the self-noise is a little bit higher than the 14 dBA that is advertised. Secondly, this is a small diaphragm condenser, and I point this out in every single SDC video. It does a terrible job at wind rejection and plosive rejection, so just be aware of that. I also found that these microphones were pretty unforgiving with background noise and reverberation, so if you're using them in an untreated space, or if you have a bunch of background noise going on, it is going to pick that up, and because this has such a deep extension into the bass and sub-bass, it seems to pick up a lot more of low-frequency rumble like air conditioners. The last thing is less of a con and more of an FYI. I found that the foam windscreen that they provide is far from transparent. I heard that it attenuated quite a bit of the upper frequencies. The reason I'm saying that's not a con, I kind of like it a little bit better with the windscreen on because it darkens it up, it tames it up a little bit, and I just enjoy that a little bit more. And now what are my overall thoughts and opinions of the Rode TF-5s? As far as the overall sound, I would say they offer a very beefy low end for a small diaphragm condenser. They seem to extend quite deeply into the bass and sub-bass. Then the mids are nice and clear and open, and they don't come across as forward as the other SDCs that I compared it against. And finally, in the upper frequencies, it offers plenty of detail and articulation without being too sharp or brittle. On the electric guitar, I think it's fine, but I don't love it. It has plenty of bass, the mids are nice and clear, and then you get plenty of detail in the upper frequencies. Depending on your tone, that can be a good or a bad thing. On the acoustic guitar, I thought it sounded wonderful. I love how supportive the low end is. It is nice and full-bodied. The mids are clear and open, and then you get plenty of articulation and detail in the upper frequencies, but it doesn't come across glassy or sharp. For singing vocals, I know I sound like a broken record because I seem to say this every time I cover an SDC, but I think it offers a really nice realistic sound. You get plenty of support in the low end, the mids are not congested or nasally sounding at all, and then you get this nice excitement in the treble and air frequencies. Finally, for spoken word, I think it works well here if you have proper wind protection, or if you have really perfect microphone technique. This thing seems to offer a ton of bass, which can be great, especially if you engage the proximity effect and make sure you do not pop it or clip the microphone. The mids are clear and open, and I love that they don't come across nasally, and then you get plenty of detail and articulation in the upper frequencies. This may exaggerate a little bit of mouth clicky clackies, but throwing on the windscreen can help reduce that a little bit. And to wrap up, would I recommend the Rode TF-5s? Kind of. The first thing I want to say is I think this is a really nice sounding set of small diaphragm condensers. I think it offers a unique sound compared to all the SDCs that I threw it up against, but the reason I'm saying I only kind of recommend it is $1,500 is a lot of money. And at that price point, this thing has so much competition, and some of that competition, a lot of that competition, is industry standard. I'm talking Neumann KM183, 184, 185, Beyerdynamic MC930s. If you want to save some money, Shure KSM141s or SM81s. Saving even more money, you could get sE8s from SE Electronics. So you really need to love the sound of the TF-5s if you're going to choose this set of microphones over its competition, because the TF-5s do sound great, but its competition also sounds great. The only real downside that I have for the TF-5s is that slightly higher self-noise. So if you love the sound of this microphone and that self-noise is not an issue, then I think this is a great option. I think they sound great, and I say rock and roll.